Welcome to the Biology 182 lecture. This video will cover humans and conservation. At the end of this video, students should be able to analyze the relationship between human and conservation of species. They should understand how ecologists restore habitats and depict conservation efforts. So what is conservation biology? This is a way to save endangered species, to protect ecosystems, to ensure sustainability, to protect habitats, and maintain natural resources. Species become endangered when there are few of them left on the Earth. There are different levels of endangered species that we will talk about. We will discuss ways to protect ecosystems and to increase sustainability for the planet, as well as ways to protect habitats and maintain our natural resources. There are many different conservation efforts, and a conservation protection area called a megadiversity country is one way to focus on how to save species that are going extinct. There are 17 countries that house 70% of all the known species on the world. These 17 countries can have a super compact conservation protection plan, and that will save about 70% of the known species. This is one way that humans can help conserve certain areas or protect certain areas, which are ecosystems, for organisms that may be on the extinction list. Megadiversity is a term to define the top biodiversity-rich countries. This concept highlights awareness for conservation issues in those areas around the world. So what's an endemic? Endemic are special species that are only found in one region. When you think about the Galapagos Islands, those islands have all species that live there are endemic to that area. In Australia, we see this. There are endemic seahorse and koala bears, marsupials, some tortoises that are endemic to that region. In China, we see endemic animals, special species of porcupine and frogs, certain polar bears and peacocks, pandas, various platypuses. And then there are species in India, like the Indian peacock, the lion-tailed macaque. These organisms are only found in one region. If something happens, it is so difficult to bring their population back. So focusing on those locations and those endemic species can help conservation efforts to avoid species extinction. So the critical endangered species are endemic species that are really in trouble, right? They are on the verge of extinction. Underneath that, we have endangered species. Then we have vulnerable. After being critically endangered, you become extinct in the wild, and then you can become extinct throughout the entire world. Zoos and aquariums, nothing would have these species left. There are then other levels that are like least concern, near threatened. Data deficient just means they don't have the information on that area and not evaluated. And the reason we want to look at these is because of the biodiversity hotspots. So these are areas we can look at tremendous biodiversity that are in danger of destruction of habitats and ecosystems, right? So there are these few areas on these continents that have a huge biodiversity area that are having massive destruction to the habitats and ecosystem. And so the destruction of these ecosystems is what's leading to the species extinction, not human interference with hunting or fishing, but the actual destruction of the habitat from things that humans are doing. So we look at these areas as crisis ecoregions, and we want to focus our efforts in these areas to preserve and protect the species living there. You can see the red is the critically endangered area, the orange is endangered, and yellow is vulnerable. The major conservation efforts are focused on habitats and ecosystems and biomes in these areas. Another way is preservation of pristine areas, which are untouched by humans. The green areas, So low impact by humans. The purple areas, not so much. Humans are in the way. And if you look back at this chart or this figure, it will show you all of those areas that are gray, so not crisis ecoregions, are the green area. If we look back here at where these hot spots are, they are the purple areas the most. We can see on this edge of North America matches up with this edge of North America. Critical region, right? Also, biodiversity hotspot. These things are related. We can see by protecting the areas, we can help increase the species and eliminate species extinction. We can also create nature preserves. This is a theory similar to island biogeography, in which we want equilibrium, where the amount of species immigrating into a population is equal to the amount going out of the population, right? And we look at an area's size and to determine how to create these nature preserves. The more organisms they have, the bigger the area. Or maybe it's advantageous to have several small populations with few organisms. So when we look at this, scientists have to decide, or ecologists are looking at, is it better to have one single large population to protect one large area with one large population of large animals or lots of small habitats? Well, there's less of a chance of extinction with many small habitats. There's less of a chance of disaster or disease creating extinction, because if one population goes, there's still 3 other small populations there. With one single large area, it's harder to protect the area from natural disasters. It's also harder to protect all the populations living there in the ecosystem. And with bigger organisms, then there's an increase for things going wrong. Another way we look at conservation efforts is through landscape conservation. And this is something that tries to eliminate the problems in habitat loss, right? When we see the fragmentation occur. And they build what's called movement corridors. And this is like a type of land area where organisms can pass through. So you can have one huge corridor that takes 2 landscaped areas, sensitive areas of land, and then it connects them between a movement corridor. This helps increase immigration and recolonization after a disaster, helps avoid predation. It also can help allow some diseases and natural disasters and invasive species to happen, but on a far, far smaller scale, because there's 2 large areas connected, and so they can migrate between. There are ways to have multiple corridors throughout ecosystems that are large on both sides, or a single corridor as well. Another thing ecologists look at in species preservation is indicator species. Indicator species, like a polar bear, has to be in a certain particular environment, right? And watching how polar bears are reacting to the environment can help determine the health of the ecosystem at large. This polar bear obviously is stuck on a piece of land in melting ice of the ocean. So we can tell that this ecosystem is not healthy right now. The coral, this coral is being bleached. There's something going on. This ecosystem is not healthy right now. Another way for us to determine health of an ecosystem is through umbrella species. Umbrella species have habitat requirements that are so large that protecting these species also protects all the smaller ones in that region or ecosystem. So by protecting the large species with the huge habitat requirement, all of those small species, populations, communities interacting in that huge ecosystem are all preserved. So the protection of one, in turn, protects all the little ones. We also have flagship species, which, like the World Wildlife Foundation, uses a panda, right? And these are large, recognizable species, like an elephant, like a lion, rhinoceros. These are things that people know what they are. Children learn what these are very early on. And they use these attractive species to garner awareness and to raise financial support for organisms. So we're talking about the hunting of elephants in order to get ivory, which is illegal. And we want to raise money to save the elephants. Well, it's also helping to save other organisms in those environments and those ecosystems that are being damaged by the hunting of elephants. Then we have keystone species. This is the role of the species that's critical for the health of the ecosystem. So a small change to something makes an enormous impact. So some of these organisms, like sharks, like the gray wolf, like the sea star or a starfish, right? Changing these organisms makes an astronomical impact to the ecosystem. So watching these keystone species and keeping them safe automatically helps preserve the ecosystem. Other things we can do include habitat restoration. And the way we do habitat restoration is in one of three ways. We either repair or rehabilitate the area, we restore the area, or we replace the habitat. We also use repopulation of species and captive breeding to help habitat restoration, and we build wildlife parks and preserves. So what's captive breeding? Captive breeding is a way to breed animals in a protected environment like a zoo or an aquarium, even botanical gardens. And then they release these organisms into the wild. That's the reintroduction aspect. They're not kept long enough to be intentionally unsuccessful at surviving in the wild. They are just bred to be able to increase the population and then reintroduced into their environment. Another thing we do, which is incredibly controversial at this time, is cloning. So the big discussion is, should endangered animals be cloned to increase their population? Or do we bring back extinct organisms? Often, organisms that are extinct that we have preserved may have genetic diseases or abnormal systems. They die early, or they exhibit immune deficiencies and organ deformations. This happens even with healthy organisms that are cloned. So instead of trying to fix the problem by increasing the number of organisms by cloning one, we should fix the habitat and save the ecosystem before they are extinct. The debate still stands, though. Should endangered animals, or critically endangered animals, be cloned? Or should extinct animals be cloned to give rise to new organisms to help the ecosystems? The first cloned endangered species was a banteng Asian wild bovine or cow. The next cloned organism was a Mongolian horse or a Przewalski horse. And the first US cloned endangered species was the black-footed ferret. These organisms did not survive and lead long, healthy lives. So it hasn't been the successful answer that they've been hoping for. However, there is great possibility with this, which is why it becomes a controversial topic on whether or not the risks outweigh the reward. Another reason for conservation efforts is for sustainability. Remember that sustainability has an ecosystem need that is met with a harmonious balance with what humans need and what humans of the future will need, as well as what the organisms living there need, right? So it's a way to protect the natural world, to eliminate humans destroying the earth, and to maintain healthy ecosystems, which usually means without humans. Mitigation of human impact is important in order to develop the needs of humans in the ecosystem, mitigating our impact. This means eliminating the negative or detrimental impacts that we're having on our Earth. We still need to maintain the balance of things in order for humans in the future to be able to have an Earth. That is sustainability. That's why we look at green things, right? Green sources of energy or natural ways to help find human needs being met and giving up the things that are hurting the earth. Some of the things that we need to protect are natural resources and natural capital. Natural capital is the number of natural resources plus natural services. So natural capital is like air purification, climate control, UV protection of the ozone layer, biodiversity by population control and pest control, non-renewable minerals like iron and sand, fossil fuels, non-renewable energy, right? Soil renewal, land food production, but also nutrient recycling, renewable sources of energy like sun, wind, and water, and water purification and treatment. These things are going to help build our natural capital because they're going to help preserve our natural resources. So the way we have provisional services is to take the biological economy or the untapped potential of biological resources and cross it with unrecognized services from nature, which is our natural capital. And this gives us a better approach to encouraging a sustainable bioeconomy. We have to have people working together to make better decisions for our future, or we will not have an Earth to call home any longer. Students should be able to indicate conservation efforts to help the biosphere. They should be able to understand how ecologists employ conservation strategies and how conservation preserves species diversity.